And then in the order that they come in, I will then just say, hey, go ahead, because I saw you want to ask a question. So that's how we're going to do the Q&A section. So I appreciate it that during the presentation that I give, because I have a lot that I want to cover in a short period of time, even though the amount of time we have seems long, for me, it will go by very quickly. Hopefully I keep all of you awake through it. Then after we finish the Q&A section, I will end the session today with a very brief meditation practice. Meditation practice, as you'll find as we walk through the course and the session today, is really important to the learning process of what we're talking about, the subject that we're embracing today. And pretty much is the case with most Dharma topics. And then I'll just make a few short closing remarks. So that's pretty much what I'll say. I do think that most of you know, before we start, that at DNKL, all of the teachings and courses and sessions that our Dharma Center offers, there's no charge for the classes. So whether that's one of our teachers like Gyurme Khenso Rinpoche or Geshe Darge, or guest teachers like myself. So in case any of you were wondering that, a few of you had asked me that. But we always do encourage people to make an offering to our center. It still is a regular place in time and space and needs to pay its bills and put food on the table for the monks and all of that kind of good stuff. So anything you can do in that way is greatly appreciated. It's easy to find a place on the website where you can do that. I'll probably remind us about being able to do that at the end of today's session.
And I'll put it in the chat, a link to it in the chat.
Yes, good. So Gloria, that was Gloria Cosgrove. So she said she put that information in the chat. So, so let's get started. Today we'll be diving into a topic that is around what's called the Wheel of Life. It's also known as the Wheel of Becoming. That word's really, really important, and you'll see why as we move along. And as the course introduction on the DNKL website says, why do we need to wake up now? Why do we need to wake up? I think we're all awake, hopefully, right now as we're in this course. And what's the Buddha's Wheel of Life have to do with that? So that's really what we're going to constantly be diving into and answering some of the questions that also were posed in the course description. Why are we in the situation we're in? Where are we going? Do our lives have any meaning? How should we make best use of our lives? And again, how does Buddhism, and specifically the Wheel of Life, have anything to do with that and helping us in any kind of meaningful way? So specifically, the wheel, as I'll call it throughout the teaching, I won't keep saying the Buddha's Wheel of Life, I'll just be calling it the wheel, is all about that. I mean, that's all it's about. This is really a big topic, and you'll discover as we go through today, I believe, evidence that I'll present in terms of why it's important that a class like this isn't just like a one session. So it's said in the course description that there will be a number of sessions that will follow this, and they're meant to allow, beyond what's going to occur today, a deeper dive into all of the specific components. There's 21 specific components that have something really deep and meaningful to say to us in the iconic allegorical imagery that's presented in the wheel. So before we start, I don't want to assume that everybody's familiar with the image of the Wheel of Life. We'll talk about images in relationship to my running narrative because they're really important. So I'm going to put on my screen share and show you two representations of the Wheel of life. So these two images, hopefully you could see them. One is a traditional Wheel of Life presentation, the one that should be showing up on your left on the screen, and the one that's on the right is a more contemporary image of the Wheel of Life. And each one of these are done in a way, and why I'm showing you these images first is because what you're going to hear in this session and throughout all the sessions in this course is you're going to be hearing about the traditional interpretation of the wheel, which is imagery wise is going to be what we allude to both narrative wise and what we're showing visually in the image that's on the left. But the image that's on the right is a more contemporary view, and that's going to be a big focus of the presentation of this course, because this course is meant for both Buddhist and non-Buddhist alike, but presented sort of side by side, the way these two images are set up here on the screen share. So we'll do a walkthrough these images piece by piece or component by component as we move along. But before we do that, I'll just go into a little bit more important background before we start doing that dissection. So I'm going to stop screen sharing right now. So one important thing is to say, like, so why am I presenting this course? I think it's kind of obvious in terms of how important I think it is as far as what I already said. But personally, over the years, I've had the good fortune to study this teaching. It's a teaching that I've personally gravitated to in my own practice, and I've really tried to apply it to my life on a day-to-day basis, not in some sort of abstract Buddhist philosophical principles way, but more in terms of how it really affects one's life and can be presented in connection with one's life in terms of having a positive and transformative effect, and one that really I think is quite important. And so if even to a small degree, you might be able to have some of the same experience that I've had in terms of what I've learned from the wheel and been able to put into certain transformative practices, I really think it's something that is worth your time. So it sounds a little bit like a sell job, but it's really more to talk about, why am I doing this? Why am I putting my time forth to teach this course? And you kind of need to know what my orientation purpose is. So I kind of just said this, but I'm following an outline I put together, so I might be a little redundant. But for Buddhists, the wheel is said to impart a kind of ultimate wisdom that can lead to deep practices pointed directly at methods to actually end suffering existence permanently. That's a pretty big goal and something that might even seem somewhat unattainable and maybe not even the point for certain people. And so in this course, we'll be using that wisdom because that wisdom is present in the wheel. And I just wanted to say that before we move too far on. We'll be using that wisdom, but I promise you that my goal is really to explore that wisdom by applying it in more tangible and concrete ways to transforming our daily life experiences into happy and healthier ones, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and even spiritually, because the wheel does have all of that to offer. So we'll be exploring this sort of becoming reality and what it really means as we walk through it today, but that's going to be the focus. At the same time, though, you're going to sort of see this like and hear from me in the presentation, sort of this is the traditional Buddhist sort of presentation on the wheel, and then the contemporary. And what I mean by contemporary will sort of reveal itself. And I've already hinted at that, obviously. But I really feel that this has to be a series because what the wheel really has to offer requires a really deep dive into all of its components. And you can't do that if you're just gonna sort of take a 2 hour stroll or walk through, even a really good one, which hopefully this will be, it just won't take you to what the purpose and function of the wheel and what it has to offer is all about, which is actually taking what it has to offer in all of its components and actually studying, contemplating, and doing certain meditation practices related specifically to them. So I really firmly believe that it's really, really important. And you guys can think about any endeavor you've ever done in life where if you were going to look to do something really well and gain something out of it that you might really desire, most of the time it requires some real preparation. So think of like saying to yourself, like, I decided that I want to go ahead and climb Mount Everest. And then further thinking, because it's the highest point on earth, and when I scale it, I'll have a view of the earth like I've never had before, and that's going to make me really happy. Okay, that's great. But then what do I do to prepare myself for that? If I just go buy an airline ticket to go from Newark Airport here in New Jersey to Nepal, Kathmandu in Nepal, and pack a suitcase, I'm in big trouble in terms of meeting that goal. Because I haven't planned, I haven't laid the foundation, I haven't prepared at all. For that particular endeavor, taking the right steps might involve doing proper training courses, learning all about the tools and techniques that are necessary for such a mission. Probably wouldn't start with Mount Everest, by the way, but just trying to make a point here. So doing training outings on more manageable mountains might make a lot of sense. And then slowly making progress towards being prepared for the altitude, the climate, the terrain that Everest has as its challenge. And even that travel planning, getting to Kathmandu is like a quarter or a third or a fifth of like what it really takes to get to Mount Everest. Once you get to Kathmandu, you then have to get from there to a location called Lupla, which is a short flight. And then you have to take about a 10-day trek to Everest Base Camp, which is 17,500 feet above sea level. So most spend like a whole bunch of time there before they then go on the main mission, just so they can adjust to the altitude and the climate and all of that. So I think the point is obvious that if you're going to take and look to tackle a subject that has as much to offer as what you'll see revealed here today in the wheel and all of its imagery and meaning, having a thorough foundation is the place to start. And then you can decide whether or not you want to proceed and dedicate some additional time to exploring the details and practices that could evolve out of that might have a transformative effect on your life. So that's kind of like what we're here today to do. It's to take that first step. That's how important I feel it really is. Otherwise, it might be fun to explore it. And for some of you, that might be as far as you go today. And that's cool, actually. This is not something that necessarily somebody wants to dedicate like a whole bunch of time to. But I'm assuming you're all here to at least look into that. So now I'll just move to talking about, which is a tradition in Buddhist practice, to talk about the source of this illustrated art that I just showed you. And the source is the Buddha himself. And for people like me who are practicing Buddhists, that matters. And it is something that gives us a lot of comfort, confidence, faith, and assurance. But some of you might not be Buddhists, like we talked about before, and haven't developed that level of confidence and faith and assurance, which is fine for you and also for everybody who's here. I totally encourage you to take time to listen to what we're going to talk about today, and encourage you to ask questions about the so-called knowledge that's imparted in this course. That's a tradition in Buddhism. It's a real tradition to question. You're not supposed to just sort of go, oh, that teacher said blah, blah, blah. And that's cool. Great. I dig it. I think it sounds good. I'm into it. I'm gonna follow that. There's not that will come back to bite you later on. Developing conviction and a sort of experiential faith through exploration is really important. And hey, that's no different than, if you think about it, what you might do if you're like enrolled in a college course and the teacher is like really well known. You know, I'm not going to equate the teacher to like the Buddha, but like, you know, similar like authority. And he or she even wrote the textbook. Well, you still wouldn't like accept everything that was said if you're a good student. You're going to ask a lot of questions. And you know what that leads to. That leads to a deepening of your knowledge and conviction. So again, I've set the class up here today to do the Q&A all together and at once. Hopefully there's some questions, maybe there won't be, but I encourage you to question. It's always the best way for everyone, including me. Like if I'm saying something and it's like, okay, I'm just saying it like a fact, you know, come in and say, well, wait a minute, like why is that true? Or what do you base that on? You know, that kind of thing, right? So yeah, so that's a real tradition in Buddhist practice. And in Tibetan Buddhism, which is our particular lineage at DNKL, really serious students, typically those who are like in, you know, following a monastic path, they do their study, they do their reflection and contemplation, they do their meditation, but they add another ingredient. They do debate. I encourage you to like just Google Tibetan monks debating, and you'll see it's really intense. I mean, they are going at it, and it's meant to create noise and upsetness and make your mind wobbly so that as you're being challenged, you can withstand that and stay focused and present your argument back with courage and conviction and clarity. So that's sort of the extreme end of like, you know, what we do in our tradition, but it's important to know that. And I already mentioned that, you know, the other important tools besides studying and asking questions are reflection and contemplation and meditation. We'll be doing a meditation at the end of this session and every session in this course. And before we start the course proper, for us Buddhists, we always try to set a proper motivation and intent. And for all of us, that really means having a compassionate, mindful intention. It would be something like, may what I learn here today be of meaningful benefit, not only to myself, but also to all others attending. And further, as I go forward in my daily life, be of benefit to all those that I come in direct contact with, speak to, or think of. So in Buddhism, we call this like the intention to benefit others. All of our moment by moment mindful study, practice, going about our daily life, that's the goal. It's aspirational, but you know, eventually it can actually seep in. So that's the intention I just set for moving forward today, and I hope you all keep that in mind as well. A word about the text that we're using today. There's two primary texts that were in the course description, and they are bookends. They're both really thorough presentations on the wheel. One is a series of lectures by His Holiness the Dalai Lama with a really fine introduction by Jeffrey Hopkins, a renowned Western Buddhist authority from the University of Virginia. That's called The Wheel of Life, Buddhist Perspectives on Cause and Effect. And the other one's more contemporary, Awakening from the Daydream, Reimagining the Buddha's Wheel of Life by David Nichtern. David's sort of a contemporary of mine. We actually don't know each other, but we do we do share this practice. And throughout this teaching, I'll be talking about both sort of ends of or views of how to present this topic. And then I list a whole bunch of other texts. Those are really for other people who want to, for people who might want to dig in further. Some of that stuff's pretty heavy duty. Abhidharma Kosha, Buddhist cosmology, logic. But one book I would recommend is a book that I think I have it here. It's a big book, but it's called Mind Training, and this has an incredible collection of real incredible meditation practices and contemplations that really are great for training your mind. And it's almost like a toolbox that, if you really get familiar with it and you get familiar with the Buddhist concepts of mental afflictions, it's like a medicine chest put together by authorities who really know how to skillfully prescribe that medicine for specific ailments, in this case, mental afflictions. So it's really, really terrific. So on to the topic for today, finally. Sorry for that long bit, but that's kind of how we roll. So the Wheel of Life is more than an intriguing symbol placed at the entranceway to most Buddhist temples and homes, which it is. It's a detailed map showing the entire breadth of the cycle of life that all sentient beings, not just humans, but anything that is alive in all of existence, travels. So that's like, that's like, wow, okay. Let's see what that's about. And further, how the entire cycle is linked together from the innermost circle. You'll see that it's made up of a series of circles emanating from inner circle to an outer rim, like a wheel. And that outer circle represents the 12 components or dependent originating links, which we'll end up talking about later. The inner circle represents the root causes, where everything emanates from, in terms of our existence, whether it's, you want to label it as good or bad or positive or negative, or a good emotion, a bad emotion, a great mental state, a bad mental state, a mixed one. It all comes from that. So having a firm understanding, again, of this will really be very beneficial to us. So to talk about the wheel and its origins a little bit more, I'll just share screen again. I just want, for those of you who don't have any images, I just want to share some images. I already shared two with you. And I want to share one more. Hopefully you could see this. This one you already saw. This one you already saw, the first two I showed you, but I just want to show you that these are some details from the second one. There are so many, there are hundreds and hundreds of representations of the Wheel of Life that have real variations to them and are really powerful in their visual presentation, and have varying meaning, but intrinsically all the same. This one's a little bit more of a close-up of the wheel itself, where it's not showing the outer edges of the wheel. So these are just some images that I wanted to share briefly so that you could see that there is an array of these kinds of images that exist, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them. So in terms of the origins of the wheel, we go back to the Sanskrit name for it, which is Bhava Chakra, and its origins. Bhava Chakra means wheel of life loosely in English, and Bhava Chakra consists of two words, Bhava and Chakra. So Bhava means various things that are loosely related: being, worldly existence, becoming, birth, being, production, origin. And then the Sanskrit word, also the same word also has meanings that relate to emotion, sentiment, state of mind, body, disposition. So in the context of the wheel here, we could see that it seems to have the right name as far as that. And then the word chakra, also derived from Sanskrit, means wheel or a circle or a cycle. It can mean a circle. It can mean a circle of people. It's also to denote mystical symbols like mandalas. You've heard that word before. And there's other types of those kinds of presentations where it will be called the fill in the blank chakra. And you all also might be familiar with the word chakra as it relates to the subtle body or nerve solar plexus within our body. And that's called the chakra system, which essentially are wheels of subtle nerve systems within our body. So it actually is an accurate word to choose in terms of referring to that. And that has a connection directly to the wheel of life on a internalization, sort of realized internally within the human psyche and body. So the wheel of life, sort of the switch over to how David Nichtern looks at the wheel of life. He sees it as using, in his interpretation of it, the traditional Buddhist cosmological imagery to convey its allegories, where he applies it to where we spend the majority of our time, which is really within our own, he calls them fantasies that we live in. And you'll understand why he calls it that. And there are 6 distinct realms within the wheel. I'm going to bring up an image of that, so bear with me. I've got to go to there. You're first going to just see the same image. Give me a second. Got to close that. So hopefully you can see this. You can kind of see the 6 realms that are around the center. These are called the 6 realms. They start, the one that's at the top is where they start. But each one of them, from a contemporary point of view, represents a particular state of mind that shapes the limits of our notions of what is real and what is possible. Our minds and our external situation mirror each other in the process, structuring our basic psychology. So David further says that fortunately there's a path clearly outlined in the wheel that presents understanding and practices for navigating our lives within the 6 realms as we work our way little by little towards waking up, hence the title of this course. So I'll stop sharing again. So in modern terms, we can think of the wheel as kind of like a PowerPoint presentation. It's a concise collection of information-rich points that provide a comprehensive overview of existential state. And one of the most important things to understand within the context of this experience is a concept in Buddhism called karma. It's an overarching theme of the wheel's images, which the word karma means action or work. And as we move along, we'll be digging into understanding with more depth what karma actually is and how it works in our lives. As some of us have studied karma, some of us haven't, but it's really important to take time out and know what karma really is and how it functions. Um, but to say a few words about karma, karma describes how our world works, how different realities come into being, and how they change. The agent at the heart of karma is the mind. All habitual thought, perspectives, and impulses that drive our behavior and experience. Karma explains how we became who we were in the past, how we become who we are now, and how we become who we will be in the future. So again, I'm not asking you to buy that if you haven't studied karma, but just in terms of what I'm saying, if that's true, that could be a really powerful concept to understand, reflect upon, and understand how you might be able to use and work with your karma to make changes. Further, the working of karma is mostly an unconscious process. Our habits are shaped by past experiences, which in turn shape present behavior, such that we find ourselves facing familiar situations in the present. The repetition of unproductive patterns, the cycle of familiar mental and behavioral landscapes, is called samsara. In Buddhism, that's like what we call suffering existence. It's what's depicted in the wheel in the 6 realms. So when we talk about that, you could see the direct impact that karma has in shaping where we actually live and exist, not just live. Right now it's snowing outside pretty heavy. So I don't know what realm I'm in right now. So uninterrupted, this could be like, kind of when we get into looking at all the realms of existence, if that's uninterrupted and it's driven by karmic ripening, it might seem a little like you're imprisoned and not so nice and maybe unpleasant. And it's like, why are we even studying this? Because that's like kind of depressing and unhappy. But one of the things that this course is going to embark upon is revealing, first understanding the components of what makes existence what it is, and then how to use practices that are available to us to change it. And that's a positive thing. So David, again, in his book says, uninterrupted by fresh input that would break this chain, these karmic cycles that go on and on. This idea is not really unfamiliar to modern psychology. The Buddha's essential message was that largely unconscious forces drive unawakened lives, placing us in an unpleasant situation and surroundings over and over again. This is why samsara, or suffering existence, or cyclic existence, is depicted as an endlessly turning wheel that only stops rolling when we awaken to the forces that drive it. So he's making a direct connection there to modern psychology, that the wheel and what it has to offer in terms of tools and techniques for first understanding existence, and how we function spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and even physically within it. He says that the wheel offers tools just like modern psychology does to people who are interested in what it has to offer. So he further says the allegory of the wheel reveals potent insights into how we get stuck cycling through psychological and emotional landscapes, and tells us how to cultivate positive tendencies that help free us from ingrained karmic patterns. So that's kind of what I just said. He continues by saying, many people these days are exploring being mindful, present, and aware in the moment. Lots of us practice mindfulness meditation. But then he says, but where are we when we are not in the present moment? Can any of us say that we're, even for us that practice meditation, that we're mindful, moment by moment and not someplace else? are we possibly not lost in what he calls a daydream landscapes that we've created in our minds? And that's what the wheel helps us explore. It breaks our wandering in this cyclic existence down into 6 distinct realms, which was the image I just showed you a moment ago. And it mirrors our own inner psychological and emotional landscape, which is what I'm trying to beat home here. And probably one of the most important things to underscore there, which ties directly into understanding karma, is that nothing is random. Nothing is random about existence in the 6 realms. And if it's not random, where is it coming from? We have to look at, and it's what we're going to be exploring in this course, is that we are the co-creators of our environments, based on past and present thoughts and actions, based on our karma. And it's not just our outward environment, it's our inner landscape, our psychological, emotional landscape, like David was talking about a little earlier and when I was reading what he had to say. So we'll be talking a lot about karma, but we're going to be talking about it in the context of the wheel once we start getting into the individual components, which will all be part of what we're doing in follow-up sessions, because I'm going to stick to the idea that this is an introductory course class, and that the further ones will be to do the deeper dives where we can not just gloss over the structure and sort of snapshot of like what the wheel is and what its meaning is, which is quite a mouthful to cover in and of itself. So from a traditional point of view, and this comes from the other text that I told you about, the Wheel of Life by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Jeffrey Hopkins writes in the introduction, by illuminating the causes behind our situation of limitation, the wheel reveals how, through practicing antidotes to these causes, we can overcome the pain and limiting situations that are their effect. So he's kind of saying the same thing that David was saying, putting it more in a traditional form. And as important to me, it shows, you'll see that as we move forward, it shows the altruistic purpose that can make life meaningful. The unsettling descriptions of the steps of entrapment that you'll see in more detail as we cover the components of the wheel. For me personally, when I was younger and I started really learning about the wheel, were for me, I'll use an expression, a cause to action. It's like, well, I kind of want to change this. Yeah, can I? And is there, besides like, finding out what this wheel has to tell us about the structure and mapping of how life really is and how it works, is there a way to change it? And yes, that's the flip side of what the wheel has to offer in its in the deep dives that you might do in and around it. It shows how the sort of the prison of self-grasping, as we call it in Buddhism, or selfishness, can be turned into, or even be transformed into a source to help develop happiness for both yourself and for others. And in Buddhism, that's a really big concept of idea of being compassionate, of, His Holiness always says, you find happiness for yourself by helping others be happy. And that's simple, but it's powerful. And again, to sort of do the back and forth between traditional and contemporary, I just want to say a little bit at this juncture about reincarnation. In Buddhism, reincarnation is a principle that is inherent in its philosophy, in its worldview, in its cosmology, and in this wheel. But I will say that for this class, we'll explore the wheel within the context of karma, which, to sort of put that Sanskrit word aside, it's really within the context of cause and effect, which I think most people can relate to. And you'll see that the way we're able to talk about the topic, we do not have to bring reincarnation into the picture at all. I will be presenting the two traditional and contemporary sort of side by side, but I want to leave it on the sidelines for the most part, because for some people, that's like a big thing to wrestle with, and it's distracting to what we're trying to teach here. It isn't essential. It really isn't. You'll see that it isn't smoke and mirrors when I try to put it on the sideline. Within a Buddhist practice, it is important. It does make one's practice more expansive within the context of understanding the wheel and a Buddhist path. In Buddhism, we talk a lot about the path. And that's actually the Buddha's third noble truth. But we really can leave this pretty much on the sidelines. So we can look at the 6 realms that are contained in the wheel, which we'll get to in more detail, as sort of a creative and fruitful way of describing our circumstances in day-to-day life. So from that sort of point of view, the realms can be seen as I said earlier, psychological landscapes that we migrate through over time. And I don't mean over time from lifetime to lifetime. The realms can also be sort of seen as our internal mood, our attitude, our habitual patterns projected out onto the world where we've mistaken them for reality. I slow down there because that's sort of a big deal. We'll get a little bit more into that in a little bit. We may move through a realm over the course, and here's where I can leave reincarnation on the sidelines, over the course of an hour, the course of a day, a month, a year, and so on, depending on how deeply ingrained that particular mental state, propelled by karmic ripening, that I will not leave on the sidelines. It's really fundamental to understanding how life works. Propelled by karmic ripening of specific, what we call in Buddhism as specific mental afflictions, which again we'll discuss in more details as we move ahead. So just a few examples to concretize that a little bit. There's a lot of blah, blah, blah in what I just said. So for example, let's just say, I'm sure this is true of any of us. We succumb to depressive thoughts and feel that the world's against us. We might slide into what's traditionally one of the 6 realms in the wheel called the hell realm. I mean, how many times has any one of us had a day where we said, I just feel like I was in hell all day, or it could last for a few hours and then things change for some reason. So it's a good example. And similarly, we might be dominated at a particular moment. Again, it could last a few minutes, it might last an hour, where we're dominated by emotions like jealousy and pride. Our friends may turn into enemies even as we move into sort of a hyper-competitive realm in that moment when we're feeling one of those mental afflictions. And in the Buddhist realm of the 6 realms that exist, that could be called like the jealous God's realm, which is a realm where you've got a lot. You got a lot going for you, but you don't have everything. And your attention is driven towards what in the 6 realms the God realm has, which is they have everything. And I want that too. So you want more, 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 more. So you could see that just sticking with the flow of our emotional self from day to day, hour by hour, these kinds of teachings and insights that the wheel has to offer can be very applicable. And we don't really have to get into the whole movement from one lifetime to another, i.e. reincarnation. So we'll try to really sort of pull back the curtain on all these sort of allegorical structures and imagery to apply it to modern day life and people's experiences. I said that we'd talk a little bit more about karma, and I want to do that at this time. Whether or not our actions are virtuous or non-virtuous are not determined by some external or cosmic authority, but by the results that our actions naturally bring. I mean, that's essentially what karma is. It's cause and effect within the realm of what we do, what we think, and what we say, and what they cause and what results they might bring. And that's like a moment by moment thing that's happening um, many times per second, in the flow of any mind stream from a Buddhist point of view. And also from a Buddhist point of view, we're each responsible for our own situation. We might not admit it or not, but that's why I preface that by saying from a Buddhist point of view, and we can drill down and talk about that more. And further, that means we're all active participants in the creation of our own karma. To me, everything I just said is good news. Well, why is that good news? That means we have the capacity to determine our future paths. And that's really what the wheel, it points towards. And when we get into the imagery, that's the very first thing we're going to cover. So if you stop and think about it, it's a very empowering way of looking at our world. So here's the real big news about the wheel. The wheel of life is essentially a portrait of how karma works. So studying it can help us to better understand how our actions have impacted our lives and to choose better ways of acting to ensure a happier future. So obviously by developing a deeper understanding of karma, we can learn to free ourselves from unconscious and repetitive reliance on our old patterns of thoughts and behaviors that we identify with and want to change. So that's really what's going on here. And that's why I wanted to take time out there for a moment to talk about karma. So finally now we'll get to a quick walk through the entire wheel and the surrounding iconography. I'm looking at the clock, time's moving on. So I'll try to go as quick as possible in case we have, there's some questions we want to do, and I do want to do a meditation at the end. So if we go back, I'm going to go back to a screen share. Hopefully you can all see that. In both the traditional and the modern wheel, we see in the upper right-hand corner the Buddha, and in the upper left-hand corner a moon. The moon symbolizes liberation. And notice an obvious thing, it's outside of the wheel. So it's liberation from the wheel of life. And that's a good thing because it means it is liberation from afflictive states, emotions, and brings us into a happier and ultimately sort of an enlightened state, to use Buddhist terminology. So the moon also symbolizes many things in Buddhist practice. It symbolizes a method or a path or a vehicle for compassionate activities, which is key to moving away from ignorance and self-grasping, which we'll soon see in the wheel is the root of illusions leading to suffering. So the moon's a powerful symbol here in the wheel. And then the Buddha, in Sanskrit, the root of the name Buddha is Bud, which means to awaken. So in the wheel, he is a symbol of someone who has awakened and is telling us that we can too. The key is working with our mental afflictions, symbolized by the moon, and transforming them into peaceful, happy, loving, and compassionate sets of emotion is possible. And he's pointing to it with his right hand and saying that's possible. Also in the traditional one, you'll see behind the Buddha's left shoulder, it's very small, like the sun. The sun is a symbol of wisdom. So it's sort of there as a reminder that this particular entity, this person pointing to the moon and saying that is a wisdom-filled statement. A lot there. And prior to his enlightenment, the Buddha was just an ordinary being, just like us. He wasn't a god. He was someone who went through the path that is depicted below him in the wheel and was able to free himself of it. So this is meant to be what we aspire to when we look at the imagery here, is that it is a method for being able to break free of what the wheel represents. And those afflictive mental states that we'll explore more in the wheel, they're the negative influences that cover up or mask over the basic pure nature of our mind. And we'll talk about that more when we start talking about the inner circle and the three key mental afflictions that it symbolizes. So I think that our cut to, we'll cut to just saying a little bit about the monster who holds the wheel. In the contemporary one on the right, David Nichtern, who that's the cover of his book, he calls that the Grim Reaper. And he sort of humorously subtitles that part of his book where he says, quote, "He's got the whole world in his hands." So some of you might know that from a popular song. But in this case, it's not really meant to be so funny, but it is a little humorous. And the Grim Reaper here represents death in both images. You know, he represents death and impermanence. And impermanence is another important concept we'll look at in depth, and along with karma and misapprehension of reality, which is one of the three root causes that are at the center of the wheel, are essential to understanding what the wheel has to offer. So being in the grips, the wheel being in the grips of such a monster, and particularly a monster that's identified as Yama or death, is like, you know, it's like a death grip. The claws, in the case of the one image on the left, and the skeleton hands of death being wrapped around the image on the right, they essentially mean the same thing. And as we get into looking at the rest of the wheel, just as a quick survey, we'll go ahead and move to the hub of the wheel. And for that, I'm going to bring up another image, so bear with me. So hopefully you can see this image. Expand it a little bit to cover up. So in the middle of this image, we can see that there are three animals. This is the part of the wheel that shows us our own condition, fundamental condition. And it starts with a, let's just see where I am here. It starts with the pig. It doesn't look like a pig here in this one, but it is a pig. And the pig is where the basic problem starts. The pig symbolizes ignorance, which really means lack of wisdom, and really means a lack of understanding existence, what its true nature is, how it really works, what really is going on. So we consider the pig to be the root, it's called root ignorance. And that's the absence, just to underscore what I said, of apprehending the truth of the status of ourselves and all other objects in existence. And we'll be exploring that in detail as we move into further sessions, because that's a really important foundational thing to understand, if you will. Out of the ignorance of the pig comes the two other of the three primary mental afflictions of attachment, which is symbolized by the rooster, and aversion, which is symbolized by the snake. And in many drawings of the wheel, they're depicted as coming out of the pig's mouth. And in this, you can kind of see that the rooster's tail is coming out of the pig's mouth, and that the snake's tail is coming out of the rooster's mouth. So they're connected. But more traditionally, both attachment and aversion come out of ignorance. Here we show it where they're coming sort of circularly feeding each other, so to speak. So these are what we call in Buddhism the three poisons: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. And in reality, in Buddhism, the Buddha identified a total of 84,000 mental afflictions. So we're not going to go over all those. And in other systems, the three poisons are sometimes the five, where we add jealousy and pride to the three. And then in other systems, there's a different number. But these three are the big enchiladas. So, we'll talk about the other mental afflictions, the big ones in context and in form of examples. But for now, the most important thing as it relates to the wheel is to understand that these three are the root of what causes all of our misapprehension of the true nature of ourselves and all other objects. I'll keep this graphic up to talk about the next part of the wheel, which are the half circles around the hub. And one half is positive and the other half is negative. Or you could say one half is virtuous and the other half is non-virtuous actions. So in this one, you could see on the right-hand side in sort of blue, sometimes it's black, that there are beings that are sort of chained together by these, not so pleasant looking demons that are dragging them down. They're dragging them down. You can see they're upside down and they're being pulled down. And the other half, it's white. And you see here depicted sort of, different people, monks and at the beginning and end of the line, and individuals that are moving upward. And the moving upward and downward are all about moving towards either a positive state of mind, sort of from a contemporary aspect, or moving to a negative state of mind. And in the next circle outside of this, these half circles, that's where we'll see the 6 states of mind, or the 6 realms. And you'll see that 3 of them are sort of, moving downward, and the other 3 are moving upward. The downward moving half circle here is all driven by beings partaking in non-virtuous actions. And the one that is on the other side, the white side, is all driven by beings partaking in virtuous actions. So I'll take a second here and move to a quick diagram of those. Just have to get this out of the way. So hopefully you can see this. It says 10 non-virtues and 10 virtues.
No, we can't see it.
Yeah.
You can't see it?
No, unfortunately.
Oh.
The original 2 illustrations are still on the screen, okay?
All right, let me try to restart the screen. Sorry about that.
No worries. I personally am loving the presentation right now.
Yeah, I wish I could. Where could I show my whole?
When you did it, John, did you say share desktop?
Yeah,
So when you do share desktop, any document you move to, you should be able to share.
that's what I was looking for.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you. I was looking for it and it was the first one. I am blind, but now I can see. So this is, if some of you are familiar with this, I don't want to take up too much time with it, but virtuous actions, positive deeds coming from wholesome intentions, sow seeds for future happiness. Again, it ties into the karmic way things happen. And then negative deeds arising from unwholesome motivations. And the chart itself is here side by side. They're classified under 3 types of actions: actions of body. So on the left, we have killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. On the right, we have protecting the life of other beings, giving, practicing generosity, as the opposite of the ones that are on the left, and then maintaining moral conduct versus sexual misconduct. Action of speech, you could see lying is counterbalanced by truthfulness, divisive speech, reconciliatory speech, creating harmony among others in that type of speech with purpose, harsh words, kind words, idle gossip, instead of that, meaningful talk. Actions of mind, covetousness is a big one. And the counterweight to that is non-attachment. And that's a big one. That's one of the toughest ones. And part of the meditation we'll do today is sort of hinting at this, not completely, but it has to do with trying to being an antidote to covetousness. Harmful intent is counteracted by loving kindness. Wrong views, countered by right views, and that's really what we're talking about here today. Is this last one, is understanding that the way we see things is misapprehending their nature, and we mean ourselves and all other things. And right view is correcting that, turning the ignorance of the pig into the wisdom of the Buddha, if you will. So let me stop sharing that. Let me just see if I could bring up the next. We're almost done with the walkthrough, so give me a second. 6 sectors around. Nope, I want to get a better picture than that. We close these. But we'll go back to, we don't have to see it very clearly. We'll go back to the traditional one. Let me try to just point out where they are on the wheel here. So on the traditional ones, we have the 6 realms. They're around. You could see the half circles we just talked about. At the very top, we have, I think I could probably show these. At the top here, we have what's called the realm of the gods. And next to that, to its right, probably can't see my mouse moving around there, is the realm of the jealous gods, or the semi-gods. Those are those ones I talked about before that are trying to attain constantly. They have so much, but they're constantly trying to attain more. We probably experienced that ourselves to some extent. And then below that, or I should go over to the left on the top, there's 3 realms on the top, is the human realm. They're all considered positive places to be experiencing existence, although remember, all 6 realms are still part of samsara, or cyclic existence, or the suffering existence. So none of these are like ideal. There's suffering experiences going on here constantly. And I think all of us can see that around us in our own realm. And then below the vertical line, that the horizontal line, we have the realm of what's called, to the right is called a hungry ghost. And below that is the hell realm. And to the left of that is the animal realm. So basically, the way I would like you to think about these realms is, and I can bring up the other contemporary wheel, is just you can kind of see that this takes it out of that sort of ghastly, realms of like, what, hungry ghosts and hell realms, and we don't have to think about that, but of experience, that one can have, like, and I said, the moment by moment reality of living. And all 6 of these realms here, and I think I have one that is even a close-up. Let's see if I can make that a little bigger, of just the 6 realms. It puts it within the context of human experience, because as we discussed earlier, these, what the wheel has to offer can be seen within the realm of our experience in this life. Doesn't have to involve thinking about reincarnation, etc. And as we also talked about, what you could see in these realms, and these are loosely equivalent. The illustrator created these 6 realms to be loosely equivalent to the meaning and intent of what we see in the traditional version of this. But what I want us to remember mostly is that this portrays 6 different settings, this particular illustration, in which we can kind of hang out, or maybe I'll use that expression, for minutes or hours or days or weeks or months or maybe even years. Now, on the other hand, the realms really take shape in our minds as a set of moods, attitudes, and emotional landscapes. They're reflected in our internal environment as dwellings, contexts, as much as in our internal environment. They're reflected in our dwelling, the contexts we operate within, work, etc., clothing, transportation, companions, neighbors, everything is part of, our experience of virtuous or non-virtuous activities that happen in the 2 half circles, as we were discussing before. We talked about this. So again, these are traditionally called the God realm, the jealous God realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realm. And the most important thing, though, here to remember is that this is really meant to reflect what happens in terms of a cause and effect relationship from living in this existence based on misapprehending reality, which is what the pig, rooster, and snake are all about, and then taking action based on that of either virtuous or non-virtuous, which is within the second circle, the 2 halves, which then result in being in one of these 6 realms. And again, we're not talking about from lifetime to lifetime. And you might say, like, well, what's so bad about the jealous God's experience? It's like pretty cool. We have a lot of pleasure there. The one thing that's important to understand about all of our experiences in life is that they're not permanent. They all end. There is nothing that is permanent. And this is a very important concept that we'll explore more in follow-up sessions. So even if you were somebody in the jealous God's realm, and you lived, you had like everything you can imagine, you would still have to eventually let all of that go, because you can't take it with you. You know that expression. And I think we probably all know, either by reading about people like this, or we might know them, where they have, like, quote, everything, but they're the most unhappy people that you could imagine. And you feel really bad for them even. So, each one of these states of mind have certain characteristics that we'll explore when we go into each one of them. So just to say a few, so like the jealous God experience is a little less stable in terms of being the ultimate pleasurable environment compared to like the God realm. So that kind of creates insecurity, competition, and those kinds of emotions there. Typically, the human realm is filled with passion, longing, and curiosity. And really, we can see it all around us. There's these waves of fluctuation between pleasure and pain. The animal realm is a stubborn realm. It's constantly striving to recreate familiar patterns of pleasurable circumstances while avoiding suffering. If you think about that, you can see it, like when you look at your pets, but you could see it in yourself too. Again, remember, we're talking about this in the context of our own psycho emotional composition. And then the hungry ghost realm, we could see being pleasurable circumstances, but experiencing mostly craving and dissatisfaction. You know, how many times have we experienced something where we've gotten some kind of pleasure, or we're seeking a pleasurable experience, but it doesn't satisfy the craving and it doesn't turn out to be very pleasant. It's dissatisfying. That's what the hungry ghost realm represents. And then finally, the hell realms kind of represents the experience of being under continual stress, continual anxiety, continual aggression and depression. Not necessarily all of them at once, but those sorts of conditions. And I think we all know people who suffer greatly from these sorts of mental afflictions. So I think it's important to, I kept this graphic up on purpose versus the traditional one, because I want to underscore that as we move on in further sessions, our goal is to really try to make this relatable to us and who we are, and not this sort of God realms and hungry ghost realms and all that kind of stuff. So that's something to really think about. And so the next thing I want to just cover before I wrap up is, let me skip over that because I kind of covered it. You know, all of this is really leading to where the big part of what we're going to focus on when we move into our next sessions, and that's the outer rim, which is symbolized by the 12 links of what's called dependent arising. These indicate how the source of suffering, those mental afflictions and the resulting actions produce, in the case of traditional Buddhism, produces lives and our ongoing ever-changing states of mind within cyclic existence. So when we drill down and start looking at these 12 links, it's a map, and within the map, there are processes and techniques that we can apply to make those changes that David Nichtern was talking about earlier, when we look to break those patterns that we hold on to that cause us, you know, whatever our particular chronic pattern suffering is, unhappiness, depression, anger, anxiety, stress. I mean, you can go on and on. I could send you a list of the 84,000 mental afflictions if you want. And you can do an exercise of sort of self-identifying. I don't think I'm going to do that, but you know, this next section then is really where we look to understand everything that started from the center, moved out to the semicircles, to then the states, and then out into the links of dependent arising. So just to talk about dependent arising for a moment, conceptually in Buddhism, we believe that everything that interacts in existence only takes place, only arises in dependence on something else. Something doesn't exist, something doesn't arise, something doesn't end. Any one of those things come into existence, exist, and decays on its own. It's not possible, and the reason is because no entity in existence has self-existence. That's what it is. It doesn't change. It doesn't ever lose its quality. It comes into existence in dependence on something else and goes out of existence in dependence on exists and then goes out of dependence on it, depending on something else. So this is something we're going to be exploring extensively as we move into analyzing the 12 links. And it's going to go all the way back to understanding, where does ignorance come from? And in Buddhism, it's not like we can assign it a beginning in time. In Buddhism, we have an expression of saying it starts, all existence starts in beginningless time. It's sort of something that just isn't something we can grapple with. And that we have to keep in mind, because that's how we're going to see once I start talking about the links. That's where the first link starts. It starts with the presence of ignorance. And I'll start this section by talking about, just giving you a quote from one Buddhist text called Precious Garland by a famous Buddhist sage called Nagarjuna, where he presents the 12 links of dependent arising in 3 groups. And so he says, as long as the aggregates are conceived, so long thereby does the conception of I exist. Further, when the conception of I exists, there's action, and from it there is also birth. So in that stanza, he's talking about all of existence, how it happens actually. So the way that can be seen is when we talk about 12 links, I'll bring them up. Here's a picture of them. Give me a second. You'll see yourselves for a second there, sorry. No, that's not the one I want. I just have to find the one I want, sorry. So they go around the wheel from the top to the bottom, but these are the 12. And the first one that has a number 1 in it is ignorance. And as long as we have ignorance, we have number 8. I surprised you, right? You thought I was going to go to number 2, which is attachment. This is symbolic of attachment. And also we have number 9, which is grasping. So ignorance really is the direct progenitor of the dependent arising links of attachment and grasping. But what follows second from action is, sorry, from ignorance is action. It's the ripening karma that occurs from ignorance that occurs in the first link that creates what we call action. And also, action generates number 10, existence. And we'll get more into how these get categorized this way as we move along in further detailed sessions on the 12 links. And then third has to do with the production of suffering. And that involves the effect consciousness, which is this number 3 image, which is a monkey. Name and form is number 4. Number 5 is sense spheres. Number 6 is contact. Number 7 is feeling. Also includes attachment, grasping, existence, and then birth. And then 12 represents aging and death. So from among the 12 links of dependent arising, ignorance, attachment, and grasping are grouped together as the first of these 3s, as I said, all sort of being generated by ignorance. And then since an action establishes a predisposition of a consciousness, that's what brings consciousness into existence, and then also what's called existence, as I mentioned earlier. And then all the other ones follow. So really, without going into a detailed explanation of the links, which I'd rather hold off on until we get to the next section, I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of them and just say a few other things about them to try to relate them to who we are as contemporary living people. So I got a few quotes here from David Nichtern that I think might help. The ring, or the links on the outer edge, describe how we move from ignorance to birth to old age, sickness, and death over and over again. It's yet another way of describing how karma develops through particular causes, creating particular effects or results, and how each of those effects and results become a cause for the next link in the cycle. So that's how he looks at it. And then sort of closing comments, I would say for this session would be to say the wheel portrays the different ways we get trapped in repetitive patterns and imprison ourselves emotionally, intellectually, and in relation to our external life circumstances. Some of that I said earlier. In addition to describing the form of our imprisonment, the wheel also points to a path out to freedom, liberation, true peace, and real happiness. Again, I alluded to that earlier. The root cause of our experience in the realms is none other than our own state of mind, our own consciousness. I talked about that earlier too in connection with karma. And just to underscore that, for example, we can be in luxurious circumstances and still be in a hellish state of mind. I used that example earlier as well. I also used an example of somebody who has tremendous fortune and circumstances in their life, but nonetheless are unhappy and maybe even depressed or suicidal. And on the other hand, we might even know someone who has tremendous challenging circumstances, all kinds of obstacles, financial hardships, and yet is fundamentally peaceful, wise, and compassionate. Why is that? And the key to understanding that is understanding that person's command over their mental state. And we can see that that comes from practicing virtuous versus non-virtuous activities. So from these examples, we can clearly see that our environment influences our consciousness, but it also seems to have its own independent basis. Working with our mind is possible in any situation, and that is a very powerful redemptive message that the wheel teaches us. The notion of transforming confusion into wisdom, obstacles into opportunity, and changing our world in the process is the central message here. Each realm holds a key to understanding the issues of that particular setting and a way to move beyond the obstacles and obscurations that confine us there. So that's as much as I can cover in the short period of time that we have, even though it seems like a long period of time. And sorry that I talk so much, but I wanted to squeeze a lot in. Let me just see if we have any questions. See, the first question here is, will there be a recommended reading before the next session? Yes, there will be. I will send reading assignments, suggested reading assignments. I don't want to make it sound like school, from the two main texts and also some other resources, so you can sort of go as far as you want. And I'll send that to everyone who will let me know that they want that and will be continuing. And the way to do that, I think, is best to just let me know directly. You can send me an email. My email address that you can use for this class is called, my email address for this is diamondcutter, that's all one word, at optimum, optimum.net. So that's diamondcutter@optimum.net.
John, should we have them CC me or keep me in the loop, because I can also upload these to each session on our description, the files.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the way to do it too, is to put it up on the wherever you feel like you.
Yeah,
actually,
I can attach files to the description like I did. I actually attached your file with the description of the
Yeah.
class. So that might be easier as we build out the other sessions. I can just add it to there if you think that's easier.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll do it both. You send me and I'll post, and then those that want it from email can email you. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds
We'll make
good.
it easy.
I like your idea.
Okay.
That
So you
sounds easy.
just send it to me.
Yep, let's do that.
Okay.
Then I see that, will the future session be utilizing the same Zoom link and password?
Yes, always.
Okay, I didn't know the answer to that. Oh, you already put that in there. All right. Yeah, sorry, I see some of the chat was about the images not showing up. Sorry about that. I think we fixed that along the way. Then you say, can you provide a copy of the 10 virtuous, non-virtuous actions? Yeah, sure, I can do that. And that's from Gloria. And we'll make that one of the resources that I just make available to
Yeah,
everyone.
and I had one question before that. Do you mind? If you missed it, can you repeat the 3 aspects of karma?
Okay, so when you say that, what are you referring to when you say the 3 aspects of karma? I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Earlier, you were talking that karma, and you said something about it has 3 pieces that can potentially impact it. So you talked about impacting your future from your past. You mentioned, yeah, those.
Okay. Yeah, well, when I talk about karma, next time we'll go into discussion about karma proper, the 4 laws of karma, how karma actually operates. What I was referring to in that part of the presentation really had to do with talking about how karma on a perpetual basis, as it occurs, which happens through taking action of thought, speech, and mind. So thought, speech, and body, if you will, physical. That plants karmic seeds, or what we call kleshas in Sanskrit. And I want to do a whole session, not a whole session, but a whole segment on talking about kleshas and how they work, because I think it's important to not just sort of accept what I just said. As that karma, those seeds are planted and it ripens on a continual basis, that's what turns into the results, or ripens into experiences we've had in the past that shape our day-to-day life. And then if we speak from a Buddhist point of view, we can even broaden that to talk about from our life to life. And that gets into a discussion of projecting karma and immediate karma. And it also is what shapes our current view, and it also shapes our future view, but never instantly. One thing that we'll learn about karma is that it doesn't happen where you take an action of body, speech, and mind, and then suddenly it ripens. There is an incubation time. It's why, not to give you a graphic example, but it's why, like, for example, if somebody murders someone, like they do a violent killing where they strangle them using their bare hands, the same thing doesn't happen to them instantly, meaning the person who committed the murder. The karmic seeds are planted. And that's why kleshas, or seeds, are thought of as seeds. They're not fully formed. They have to then grow and ripen and manifest. And there are practices one can do to change those karmic ripenings, and have them not ripen or to be negated. Let's put it that way. And that's a whole discussion to have, that one could have. And there's a famous Buddhist saint, his name is Milarepa. And if you even Google Milarepa and read his life story, and again, forgetting about past lives and all that, in his life, biography, if you will, he was a horrendous human being. And he did the most unspeakable things. And in that same lifetime, by doing certain practices, he was able to transform his black karma into white karma and further become an enlightened being. And, you know, that is a story, but it's also something that is meant to illustrate how one can work with karma. It's not preordained or predestined that you'll have ripening the way that it's initially projected from when it's planted. So hopefully, Gloria, that helps a little bit. Let me just see if there's any other questions. Images. Jackie Healy says, I have a question. Does Jackie still have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, I actually had two questions, but I don't think we have time. The first one, you earlier, I hope I'm not misquoting, you said that we could work with our karma to make changes. Can you expand on that or give examples if I heard properly?
Yeah. Well, this has to do with the Buddhist concept of transforming our fundamental misapprehension of how things really are into an understanding of how they really are. And that's transforming of ignorance into wisdom. And there's a teaching and there are practices that go hand in hand with that karma working within the context of that wisdom. And in Buddhism, it's called emptiness. So it's practices related to karma and emptiness, but without sort of having first deal with that root, one of the three root poisons, ignorance, represented by the pig, and transforming our ignorance into wisdom, or really a misapprehension into proper apprehension of how things really work. We can't really start to work on transforming our karmic experiences. And that's why it's part of understanding impermanence, dependent arising, and why that happens. And it's because things lack inherent existence and because things are not as they appear to be. And then exploring that, understanding that, and then bringing that to the fore in certain meditation, contemplations and meditative processes, we can then work with the good qualities of body, speech, and mind in meditation practices. And karma can be changed in the sense that what's already been established can sort of be put, could be dissolved, can be transformed. But it isn't as simple as sort of doing a simple meditation without having that knowledge and developing that wisdom. That's something that's essential in the recipe. Does that make any sense?
Yes, thank you. Do I have time to ask a second question or not?
Sure, go ahead.
You also, hopefully I'm quoting you again, that you mentioned that we have habitual patterns that we then project onto the world. Sometimes it's hard for us to see that we're doing this. Can you give an example or how we can see that we're doing that?
Seeing what we project onto the world?
Yeah, no, that our habitual patterns, you know, we project our, I'm assuming you meant habitual patterns, meaning negative afflictions, or? Well,
in actuality, it's all our moment by moment experiences. I mean, literally. From a Buddhist cosmology point of view, those seeds I talked about, the karmic ripenings, from that point of view, there are actually 64 karmic ripenings happening every finger snap that I can go as fast as I can go. I'm not too good with finger snaps. So there's so much, it's unfathomable. There's so much karmic ripening happening. And that is what we are, that is our projection, or what we're projecting into the world and onto the world and being reflected by the world, which is a whole nother topic that is dependently arising. That's what's and it's happening constantly. It's a constant state. And one of the things that you can do in meditation is slow down sort of that sort of the speed of that and put your mind in a place where that is put aside, you know, where you have like a totally calm mind. That's called shamatha, focused, singularly focused. And then if and when an object crosses your meditative path while you're in that state, that's it. That's what you're asking. That's actually seeing one of your projections coming on your horizon, like your mental horizon, when you're in that sort of that single pointed concentration state. Otherwise, it's hard to see. We could talk about it like the way I just did, but then it's hard to see. That help?
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Okay. Just Bernadette asked, can you talk a little bit more about being covetous versus being content and at the same time still striving? How do we balance pursuit and our growth with accepting what is? Yeah, well, any one of the non-virtuous states, and one of the first mental one, or one of a quality that is of mind, is covetousness. And it's the hardest one to deal with because what's coming on our horizon constantly and seems to be coming at us from the external reality of our day-to-day, moment-by-moment existence is stuff that puts us in a position to be, what would you say, in a position where we might still need to be in that state in order to use your word, Bernadette, strive. And then you talk about it being balanced. What it's more about doing, and we can experience this through doing certain meditation practices, putting ourselves in a spot where we're in a place of equanimity. And we start from there and let all of our experiences arise from there. And you'll see that the quality of covetousness, along with the other qualities of non-virtuous activity, they sort of, you can't find them. They sort of recede mentally. And then that will show you the way forward in your moment by moment, day-to-day way of interacting, like really emotionally, psychologically, in the physical world of like pursuits and things that you're looking to accomplish and goals that you want to reach. It's more about the quality of how you're going about those things, not changing whether you can go about those things with the same commitment and the same emotional passion, but does it have that quality? That could recede and maybe make more powerful what I think you're generally talking about there. And it's an experiential thing. And that's actually something that I think is really attainable. And doing equanimity meditation practices and some others too. And I could send you a few others if you want. And we'll do an equanimity practice today to finish our session, by the way. So maybe that you'll find a little bit in that. Does that help?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me just take one more question. There's 3 more questions, I think, or 2 more. Rachel says, you were saying that everyone in circumstances, even those with limited mental competence, are imprisoned through social and oppressive political situations, are able to be responsible for that. Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
We don't see that question. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm trying to consume the question so I can repeat it. Okay, 2 different questions, I think then. Rachel's asking, although the wording is a little funny for me, are you saying that everyone, Rachel, maybe would you mind like repeating it? Oh, put on your mic. Can't hear you.
Sure, John. Everybody, hi. Sorry, I had some errors there. So I say you're saying that in every circumstance, even circumstances where people have limited mental competence or people are imprisoned through social and oppressive political situations, that they are able to have be responsible for their own situations or improve karma, etc. How has that been measured? You
Yeah.
state it like it's such a fact, and I'm just wondering
Yeah.
how's that measured?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'm not saying that that everyone is able to be, quote, responsible for their own situations. I'm saying that in the view of looking at how things work in terms of how things arise and in terms of understanding how things work and how things arise, if one is fortunate enough to be in a position where they can become aware of certain information, and let's call it practices or exercises that they can do in order to improve their situation, then that's a blessing. When we talk about the world of even just the 6 realms, okay, someone who is in a more limited mental capacity and may be imprisoned, as I'm using your words, through social or oppressive political situations, they're not in ideal situations.
Yeah.
They're just not. And that's where people who have the abilities to access what we're discussing today, if they could dedicate their own efforts and their own practices, not only for your own improvement, but for the benefit of all of those. It goes back to the motivation and intent of your practice and your own life path that I talked about. We dedicate, even when we do a teaching, we don't do it for ourselves. We're doing it for others. You are affecting those people. And how does that take effect? Well, there's a myriad of ways. One is that you might call it the power of prayer. You might call it the power of intent. You might call, and you're planting karmic seeds while you're doing that for future well-being of all sentient beings, which you'll hear those words in my closing dedication of this session. And that those people, if you have that kind of acute, I'm pointing over to your comment, that kind of acute awareness, then you make that part of your practice. Then in an outward way, that knowledge and that experience that you might gain through seeing that you can make some of these changes for yourself, you might fill in the blank. You might be driven to take certain actions on your own to help those people, to benefit those people, to be of service to them. Because we're not all in the same place. It's part of the reality of the suffering of existence. And those 6 realms, if we don't think about them as separate realms, but think about all of us can be in any one of them or all of them at one time because of the complex situation we might find ourselves in our life, mentally, internally, or outwardly, like a political. These are the complexities of life. So, and you had another question though, and even if that didn't answer your question, for the benefit of time, I just want to say a few words about it because I think it's really important. Because this one I understand. You said, is the goal of our path to strive for and attain the God realm? From a Buddhist point of view, it goes back to the wheel and the Buddha in the upper right-hand corner pointing across to the left-hand corner to the moon. One of the 6 realms of existence is the God realm. That's in samsara. That's in suffering existence. That is not a state of permanent happiness. It's not a paradise. It's not a heaven. It is a suffering existence. It's filled with exceptional joy and pleasure that ends. It doesn't last forever. So it isn't a realm that you want to strive for. Liberation that leads to heaven, that leads to a Buddha paradise, that leads to permanent joy is and happiness is what you strive for. If you're of a certain type of practitioner, there are some practitioners who do Buddhist practices or these kinds of practices and they believe in karma and all of that, just to improve they believe in reincarnation, just to improve their next incarnation. They're not concerned about liberation. We come in all flavors, right? But from a Buddhist point of view, you would not want to have that be your goal. It's still part of suffering existence.
Okay.
So hopefully that helps a little. There was one more question, so I think maybe I should take that from Laura. Are the hell realms basically the suffering of your own emotional afflictions, which become your reality caused by karma? Yes. So the question was, are the hell realms basically the suffering of your own emotional afflictions, which become your reality caused by karma? That's kind of at the heart of what I was teaching. But not only the hell realms, all of the realms are a result of your practice of virtuous or non-virtuous activities of body, speech, and mind, which could be any one of the realms. And some of the examples I gave during my teaching talked about different phases of, hell, jealous gods, etc., that you could move in and out of, even moment by moment. But they're all the way you describe that, not just the hell realm. We're in any one of them or all of them for that reason that you just so aptly put it. Adam, I will take one more question, sorry. Adam asked the question, are the demons of hell realms permanent residents or are they too destined to one day become Buddhas? Well, from a Buddhist point of view, all of existence is a suffering realm. And there's beings in Buddhist cosmology that are called bodhisattvas. And they take on the mission to stay in the suffering realm of existence to help all sentient beings until they reach enlightenment. And that is actually called bodhicitta. And that is something that is stated as a goal and a promise and a pledge by a bodhisattva because there is an end eventually to samsara. All beings will reach a state of non-samsaric existence, let's put it that way, whether you want to call it a Buddha paradise or heaven or whatever, but one of permanent ending of their suffering. And that would include any sort of being you want to label a certain way, like a demon. From a contemporary psychological and emotional point of view, a demon is more the equivalent of that which harms you endlessly and is really something you want to get far away from, and you might be an alcoholic, you might be somebody who's a heroin addict, you might be somebody who is plagued by severe anxiety and want to commit suicide. Those are all demons. They're mental afflictive states that the Buddha and Buddhism identifies. As I said earlier, there's actually 84,000 of them. So hopefully that helped a little bit answering some of those questions. In the interest of time, though, I'd like to finish the session. It's running late, so we'll try to do a very short session on meditation on equanimity, if that's okay with everybody. I'll lead it, and if you turn off your mic, if you have it on, if you might have had it on, turn that off. And then I'll just say a few things about equanimity, and then end it with a very simple meditation that you can take one of those with you in practice if you like. And then I'll just do a few closing remarks from there, dedication from there, if that's okay.
Before you do that, how do you want to come up with the timing for the next classes?
Yeah, I was going to talk to about that at the end.
Good. All right. I just didn't want you to forget. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So if everyone would just sort of try to sit comfortably, or if you are a meditator and you use a meditative pose and are able to, please try to assume that position. It's always beneficial to be in a meditative pose. And you can close your eyes or put your eyes in a half closed state, whatever your preference. Relax your body, your neck, your shoulders, your arms, your legs. Try to be as physically relaxed as possible and just do some even breathing. I might normally ask that we do rounds of breath that calm us, that take a little longer, but in the interest of time, I think if we can all just continually focus on calming our breath while you listen to me say a few words about equanimity. And then from there, I'll ask you to do a proper short, very short meditation on equanimity. So, equanimity protects us from emotional overreaction and allows us to rest in a bigger perspective. What is equanimity? And how can we invite more of it into our lives? Equanimity is being willing and able to accept things as they are in this moment, whether they're challenging, boring, exciting, disappointing, painful, or exactly what we want. Equanimity brings calmness and balance to moments of joy, as well as difficulty. It protects us from an emotional overreaction, allows us to rest in a bigger perspective, and contains a basic trust in the course of things. Equanimity is like the eye of the storm, the calm center that is grounded in the knowledge that everything is constantly changing, and much of it is out of our control. The mature oak tree is another symbol of equanimity, firmly rooted in the earth. It's not moving by the changing seasons and weather patterns. The tree owns this stability, its tap roots, which anchor it securely so that it's stable but not rigid, even in strong storms. So we can ask ourselves, what are our tap roots? What helps us withstand the inevitable storm of life? The Buddha warns against being taken in by the 8 worldly winds, which today, 2,600 years later, still blow back and forth. Pleasure and pain, praise and blame, success and failure, profit and loss. Of course, we prefer to experience only one side of the winds, the side we see as positive. But the more we see that they shift again and again, the more deeply we can connect with our taproot. Without equanimity, we'd be overwhelmed by the suffering in the world, and we'd shut down or turn away. Without equanimity, the immense beauty and joy of the world, which are also part of reality, could seduce us into a Pollyannish worldview. Equanimity is vast enough to hold all sides of life in a caring embrace. One thing equanimity should not be confused with is indifference. From the outside, these two conditions look confusingly similar, which is why in Buddhist literature, indifference is referred to as the close enemy of equanimity. Equanimity isn't grinding your teeth or white knuckling it. Rather, it's caring deeply, but with a sense of ease. Equanimity can only arise through the embodied acceptance of the fact that we don't have complete control over any given situation. Living life as a conscious way will make us more equanimous over time, but we don't have to leave that up to the worldly winds. We can practice it deliberately. Ultimately, our equanimity isn't only good for us, but it's also for everyone we encounter. So with those words, hopefully setting a little bit of a frame of reference, we'll do 3 short equanimity meditations. The first one is called Stay Open. Simply reflect on a situation in your life that you initially viewed as negative, but which then led to a much better situation you couldn't have foreseen at the time? I, for one, can think of many. Try to bring one to mind of your own. And while you do that, I'll suggest an example. Perhaps a painful breakup made it possible to find your true love, or a rejection after a job interview ultimately led to better employment. Try to find your own example. Bring it into focus in your mind and sit with it. See the initial negativity and how over the horizon of time, it became a wonderful event in your life, either emotionally or professionally or otherwise. Stay with that feeling. Relax in that feeling. Be happy. Invite this perspective into a current situation where you can only see the negative side. I can definitely call to mind more than one. And what might be the idea of doing that? Try to relax in seeing that current situation and only the negative side. Relax in the sense that, like the previous negative situation that you called to mind, you can imagine on the horizon that the end result can be perfect, balanced, not filled with anger, desire, over-attachment, but could just happen. This is staying open. The next meditation is called When a Loved One is Suffering. It's difficult to endure when someone we love suffers. Often we take on their suffering as our own. We get caught up in the feeling of guilt that we cannot help more, or we believe we need to feel bad too, out of a sense of solidarity or something else. This exercise that follows is meant to provide the essence of insight that ultimately we cannot make someone else happy. We can only work with our own mind and reactions and make our own decisions. So quietly repeat the following sentences to yourself in your own meditative space. You can also find your own relationship with any one of these following sentences and bring them to mind during the day. The first one: everyone is on their own life's journey. The next one: I am not the cause of your suffering, or not the exclusive cause. The next one: it isn't in my power to end your suffering, although I would like to if I could. And the last one: moments like this are hard to endure, and yet I will continue to try to help where I can. And the last very brief meditation is what I call an open awareness meditation. After the initial focus on the breath in the meditation, as I've asked you to do previously, we can open our awareness like a camera lens until the difference between foreground and background, foreground being your breath and background being everything else, such as thoughts, feelings, sounds, and body sensations, dissolve. We sit back and watch the constant arising and passing away of experience in a moment without getting caught in the details. We rest in the perspective of the vast blue sky and let all of our experience pass through like clouds or flocks of birds. Just relax in that moment of your own space, foreground breath, and background everything else, letting the background dissolve, which is whatever appears on your mental horizon. Stay in that place for a moment. So take a deep breath and bring yourself up out of that meditative space. And hopefully next time we have more time to do a meditation. I kind of moved us quickly there. Sorry about that. But the intent of sharing with you a sense of equanimity and the importance of it in this teaching is something that I felt was important to do. It's sort of a foundation or a grounding spot for moving forward with these kinds of teachings. So I'll just end it very quickly. I'll do this dedication. If you listen, maybe you can embrace part or all of it. By the goodness of the deed I have just done, may all sentient beings complete the collection of wisdom and merit, and this gain the ultimate bodies that wisdom and merit make. May what we've learned here today be wholly dedicated to the future well-being and happiness of all sentient beings, where there is no longer any suffering existence and only happiness and endless joy. So that's the end. And I'm glad that you put up with listening to me for 2 hours. It's very
Thank you.
nice.